Check 1, 2, 3. Check 1, 2, 3. Check 1, 2, 3. Check 1, 2, 3. Welcome to the holy city of Jerusalem. Thank you to everyone for tuning in, and thank you to Project Inspire and the countless people who put a tremendous amount of effort to bring incredible Jewish content all year round at your doorstep. And in particular, I want to thank Rabbi Simcha Barnett, Rabbi Yossi Friedman, and his awesome kids who I know are tuning in right now, as well as Shippy Endelman and so many others. And of course, to all of you, again, thank you for tuning in during this auspicious time here in Jerusalem. And what I am going to try and do over the course of the next hour is to do two things. One is to give you a historical tour of the beautiful city of Jerusalem. And that's because I know so many of you wanted to be here this year, this summer, on some of the awesome trips that Project Inspire conducts here in Israel, most notably the Momentum trip. Or maybe you wanted to come here with your families on your second, third, fourth, fifth time here to Israel, and in particular in Jerusalem, but of course could not because of the pandemic, because of COVID-19. And don't worry, I do have my mask right here, which I will be wearing as we are walking through the city of Jerusalem. But right now, there's nobody around me and I feel safe not wearing it. So I'm going to give you the historical tour, but I also want to be able to tap into the energy of this time so that we gain a greater understanding of what Tisha B'Av really is. Because if you are like me, then sometimes you have a hard time really capturing what this time of mourning is really all about. Because oftentimes when we think of mourning, we immediately associate it with sadness. But mourning isn't directly sadness. It's oftentimes a byproduct, but rather mourning is focusing our attention onto that which we have lost, whether it's a loved one, whether it's an object, a building, a temple, or an ideal, right? An ideal that we have, that we hold dear to us, that we feel is lost. So I'm going to try and tap into that a little bit. And I'll start with that by noting that my Tisha B'Av will never be the same. You see, last year, 3 days after Tisha B'Av, I lost my father. And I wasn't close with my father. We had a very rocky relationship. In fact, unfortunately, we didn't speak for 4 years prior to his death. And I spoke to him about an hour before he passed on. And when I was at home sitting Shiva that very first night, my Eshet Chayil, my incredible, awesome wife, Melissa, who is an absolute rock to me and for me and our family, I told her, I'm not too sure what's going to happen tomorrow morning when people show up here. What are they going to think? They're going to see that I'm not really mourning, that I haven't been dealt this significant blow in my life, that there isn't this sudden void because my father is no longer here. I didn't have a father that I could lean on, a rock that could support me when I was weak. And she said, well, maybe what you're mourning is the loss of potential that no longer exists. Because as long as your father was here, there was always potential that the relationship would be healed, that it would be rectified, and you would have that traditional relationship of a father and a son, somebody who you could turn to. But now that he's no longer here, that potential doesn't exist, and that is something to mourn, that ideal. So even though we don't know what it was like when the first temple stood, when there was open miracles that you could see with the naked eye, maybe what we can do is mourn the potential that could have been, especially during these times right now. I mean, the world is in total chaos. There's wars, terrorism, pandemics, riots in the streets of major cities across America. What could it be if we had a temple unifying the Jewish people so that we could spread forth that light that we're commanded to be upon the nations? Maybe that's something that we can mourn. And I hope by the end of this tour, we could tap a little bit more into those ideals. But I want to get started right now with the historical tour, and we can look at the walls of Jerusalem here behind me. And these aren't the walls that the Romans breached on the 17th of Tammuz 18 days ago, nearly 2,000 years ago. But rather, these are the walls that were built by Suleiman the Magnificent, the powerful Turkish ruler of the Ottoman Empire, who built these in the middle of the 16th century in the 1500s. But the walls are built on the ruins and the foundations of the walls that did stand here during the Second Temple period that the Romans did breach. And if we were doing a walking tour of Jerusalem around the old city walls, you can actually see some of the foundations and some of the stones from that wall. You can even see burial tombs from the First Temple period that still exist there. But we're not doing a walking tour around the old city. We're going into the heart of the old city, ultimately ending up on the top of the Asia Tour World Heritage Center with a magnificent view of the Western Wall and the Temple Mount, the holiest place to us, the Jewish people. So what I want to point out, though, is this line of stones that you can see over here that lead all the way up to Jaffa Gate. And this line of stones is actually part of a wall that you can see over here. And even though this wall does not date to the Second Temple period, but rather this is a Crusader wall from 1,000 years ago, it will give us an idea of the way Jerusalem was built 2,000 years ago, because Jerusalem just didn't have one wall. In fact, it had 3 walls. And each time the Romans were able to penetrate one of those walls, it was an opportunity for the Jewish people to do tshuva, to do repentance, to refine themselves, to rectify themselves, to return to themselves, in order that we shall be saved, that we could have been saved, that Jerusalem could have been saved. But we didn't heed the call. And one wall was breached, and the second wall was breached, until finally the fortified walls were breached. And just come around here, I want to show you something super cool. Is that underneath this bridge that you're going to see the cars driving underneath, is that you have some ruins down below. Underneath the bridge, you're going to have some ruins down there. And those ruins do date back to the Second Temple period. And what we have over there is a marketplace that existed outside Jaffa Gate, the main gate into the old city, for thousands of years, as there was a road that led to the port city, the ancient port city of Israel, which was Jaffa, which is now known basically as Tel Aviv. And this was a market that people would take their Meiser Sheni. What is Meiser Sheni? Meiser Sheni is like tithes, a portion of your field. Remember, we're an agricultural people back then. We weren't lawyers and doctors back then. We were an agricultural people. We're farmers for the most part. That a portion of our field would be used, the food, to eat it in Jerusalem during the Shalosh Raglim, the 3 major festivals. And that Meiser Sheni, of course, would have gone bad by the time they got here. So they would sell it, and those coins, that money, would then be spent in the marketplace over here. Even though we're not commanded for Meiser Sheni at this time, we don't have a temple, right? Times are different now. People still carry on this tradition, and they'll set aside some money, some of their earnings from the year, and they'll say, this is holy, this is Kedusha, this has been sanctified, this has been set aside to help me bring my family to Jerusalem, to Israel. Or if you're planning on coming to Israel anyhow, that this money will be set aside to use in the restaurants here in Jerusalem, like in the days of old, that I should use this for food here in Jerusalem during my journey, or that this this money is going to be used ultimately here. So if you're going to come here, maybe you're going to use it in the shops. What a great idea that you guys could take on right now and say, hey, you know what? This percentage of our earnings every year is going into our little, piggy bank, into our reserves. And this is what we're going to use when we're in Jerusalem. Shana haba b'Yushalayim. Please, God, all of you will be able to have the merit, and we should have the merit to receive you here in Jerusalem when this is all said and done. So I'm going to go ahead and put on my mask right now as we are about to enter into the old city through Jaffa Gate, and it's beautiful. In fact, if you look at the stones, you can see some of these stones. None of them really match. They come from different time periods. Some of them are actually Herodian from the Second Temple period. Some of them are Crusader. Some of them are Ayyubid, and really only a small portion of them at the very top are Turks, even though they're the ones who built the wall. And as we enter, we can see the mezuzah over here, you know, just another beautiful concept of the Jewish people taking darkness and turning into light, finding the sparks within the lowest of places, is that this mezuzah is actually made from the copper that were, from the bullets that were shot during the various wars, or particularly 1948, the War of Independence, and 1967, when the old city was liberated, and they melted them down and they made the mezuzah covers on it. That we should never forget the battles that were fought and the heroes who fought them in order that the old city would become liberated, and once again we would be able to return here to Jerusalem, to the Western Wall, in order to practice. Now, we just entered into Old City, and I got to tell you, it breaks my heart as a tour guide who walked these streets very regularly that I see the streets are now empty, that the people are not here. The tourists, the pilgrims, and those that want to connect can't come here at this time because of COVID-19 and because of the pandemic that is occurring at this time. So here we are, we're in it. And so what a great opportunity now to tap into or to discuss the political nature of Jerusalem 2,000 years ago. You see, Jerusalem and the Jewish people were very divided towards the end of the Second Temple period. There was sectarian violence. There were maybe even dozens of various groups vying for power. But really, there were four main groups, one of which didn't reside here in Jerusalem. They had like almost done away with Jerusalem. And they sort of built a commune at the edge of the Judean desert near the Dead Sea, a place called Qumran. And those people are known as the Essenes, okay? The Essenes are the ones who wrote the Dead Sea Scrolls. And we're not going to discuss them. Maybe at another time we could do another tour, discuss the Essenes. We're going to talk about the other three major groups that were here in Jerusalem. The first I want to mention are the Sadducees, okay? The Sadducees were really the rulers of Jerusalem and the Jewish people, the priesthood, the high priest, the kings of Israel at that time. And you might think to yourself, well, these must have been the righteous ones. Well, unfortunately, that wasn't the case. And the temple had become corrupt. And there was a lot of good people. There were a lot of righteous individuals within their ranks, but there was also a lot of bad people. And there was a lot of embezzlement that was going on. There was a lot of embezzlement that was going on. And there was a lot of bribery that was happening. And so the Sadducees weren't the best of people at that time to lead the Jewish people. And then you had another group that was so self-righteous, known as the Sakkari. And they could not accept any other way than their own. And they wanted to throw off the yoke of Roman influence, which the Sadducees had fallen prey to. And they're the ones who really wanted to go to war against the Romans and to throw the yoke of foreign oppression off of our shoulders. And that sounds really holy, and that sounds awesome. And I'm gung-ho for that as well. I mean, you know, it took us a little bit longer, 2,000 years, to finally be able to throw off the yoke of foreign oppression. And I'm talking 1948, when we finally declared our independence here in our ancestral homeland, in the land of Israel. But the Sakkari literally murdered fellow Jews here in the streets of Jerusalem that did not walk their path or did not agree with how to attain the same objective that we all had, which was peace for Jerusalem, peace for us, and to save our holy temple from the destruction that everyone saw coming. And then you had this middle group known as the Pharisees, the rabbinic teachers, the scholars who pleaded to both parties, but primarily to the Sicarii, that fighting against the Romans was futile, that their armies were vast, that their wealth was basically unlimited, and that the best solution for this at this time, we all want to throw the yoke of foreign oppression off, but the best solution at this time would be to come up with some type of diplomatic agreement with the Romans and to save Jerusalem and to save the Holy Temple. But they refused to listen, and they wanted to go to war. This war did not happen overnight. This war took decades. It was brewing for decades. And the war starts up north. When it finally pops off in the year 66 CE, it's happening in the north. And 4 years later, it rolls into Jerusalem. Jerusalem is under siege. The Romans and their tens of thousands of soldiers are surrounding the city. Nobody comes in, nobody comes out. And we have food and reserves and water and grain in storehouses that were purchased by some of the more wealthy individuals here in Jerusalem, enough to allow the Jewish people to survive under siege for years, years and years and years, much longer than the Romans could have survived on the other side of the wall. So it seemed like maybe a diplomatic solution would come in the end. But the Sicarii, hell-bent on going to war with the Romans, literally burned down the storehouses of food. They destroyed the food. There was no other option. It was either starvation or war. And so what were we left to do? At the same time, on the 17th of Tammuz, the Romans finally breached the walls of Jerusalem. And there was blood being spilt right here, right where I'm walking. Streets of Jerusalem. Now, I just want to talk a little bit again, right? We're doing a little historical tour as well. Jerusalem has 4 quarters. The Jewish quarter, obviously there's a Jewish quarter, right? It's our eternal spiritual capital, modern state. We're good? Great. We're in the Armenian quarter. Why is there an Armenian quarter? And if Armenians are Christians, so how come there's not a Christian quarter? So the Armenians have actually been here for 2,000 years. They were originally hired as mercenaries. Talking about right here now, they were there when the walls were breached. They were there at the destruction of the temple 2,000 years ago, hired by the Romans. And at the end of the war, the Romans looked to the Armenians and said, hey, help us repopulate the city. We'll give you tax breaks. Instead of being mercenaries, you can become merchants and tradesmen, and we'll even give you a section of the old city. And that's this section right now. They still have the same section that was given to them for 2,000 years. But most of the Armenians who live here today are not here for 2,000 years. This is their spiritual center, and where the Armenian church is located. And there was a genocide against the Armenians between 1915 and 1923. Swap with me. 1923, where 1.5 Armenians were systematically murdered by the Turkish government, the Ottoman Empire. And those that could flee came here to Jerusalem because there was enough international eyes here that the Turks who were living here were unable to massacre the Armenians who arrived here. So most of the Armenians who live here are here since 1915. Folks, we just arrived to the beginning of the Jewish quarter. And you can see a sign right here that even says, welcome to the Jewish quarter. But underneath it, it says something very auspicious. It says restored 1967 to 1983. Why did it need to be restored? Well, the Jewish quarter in 1948, during the War of Independence, fell to the Jordanians. And for 19 years under Jordanian occupation, the Jewish quarter not only was looted in the first several hours of the Jews being forced to flee, but the entire Jewish quarter was destroyed. And in that destruction, you can imagine 19 years later, when we liberated the old city, that men, women, children, right? Men and women, 36, 45, 55 years old, who grew up here in the old city, who want to return to those homes, and what they found was rubble. They must have cried seeing the destruction of their homes. And, but again, just like the mezuzah, right? The Jewish people taking sparks of light wherever they can find them, turning sadness into joy, right? Classic example of that is Yom HaZikaron, our Remembrance Day for our fallen soldiers, which at night, when it goes, you know, the Hebrew calendar changes at sunset and into night, it goes from Yom HaZikaron, a day of sadness, of mourning, into a day of joy where we celebrate Yom Ha'atzmaut, our Independence Day. So just here too, seeing the destruction of our beautiful Jewish quarter and our ancient and old synagogues and homes that were once populated, what we had now was a bunch of rubble. So what do? We dug down deep in order to build these new apartment buildings, right? There's a residential area. You can see the children behind me, right? There's a residential area. We built these new apartment buildings, but in order to do so, we had to dig down deep and build better and bigger foundations, and so that they would, you know, could withstand, and we could build taller and wider and more apartments and have more families move into the old city. But digging down, we found the ruins, not of the homes that were destroyed in 1948, but rather the homes that were destroyed by the Romans 2,000 years ago. And there are incredible museums right here in the Jewish quarter. We're not going to visit them today, that you go underground underneath these buildings and you could see the homes that were lived in by the priestly families and some of the wealthier families here in the upper city, in the new city, what is the Jewish quarter today. But not only that, we found ruins from different time periods as well. And what I'm going to do right now is I want to focus on the Cardo, because the Cardo might be my favorite place to guide really in the entire old city, but definitely here in the Jewish quarter. And, you know, you might think to yourself, well, the Cardo, that's Roman. Why would something Roman be your favorite place to guide in the Jewish quarter? And the fact of the matter is that the Cardo really has nothing to do with the Jews, but at the same time, it has everything to do with the Jews. You see, the Cardo was built after the destruction of the temple. Okay, let's just go down here a little bit onto the stairs so I can take off my mask. The Cardo was built after the destruction of the temple. About 70 years later, rose up this great Jewish warrior. I'm going to just stand right here, so maybe you can stay there. Rose this great Jewish warrior by the name of Bar Kokhba. And Bar Kokhba led this revolt against led the Jews, another revolt against the Romans. And he dug out tunnels and caves in the hills leading up to Jerusalem and Hebron and Bethlehem and Shechem and all of the holy cities of biblical Israel, right? The heartland of the Jewish people, our holy places. And he was so successful in this guerrilla warfare and these tactics that he was using that he literally threw out the entire Roman Empire, the Roman army. In fact, there was not one Roman official who who was still here in Jerusalem fighting against the Jewish people. He even made blueprints to rebuild the Beit HaMikdash and the temple and printed his own coins. I mean, it looked like redemption was upon us. But the Emperor of Rome at that time, a man by the name of Hadrian, brings half of the Roman army here to Jerusalem and completely destroys this revolt. In fact, there are stories that are recounted that there was blood in the streets of Beitar, which is a city just south of Jerusalem, that flowed from there all the way to the Mediterranean. I don't know if that is the case, but for sure there was a lot of. Yes?
I believe we have a technical issue.
Yeah. Let me see. Hold on. We might have a technical issue here. I don't think that is for us. Sorry about that. I had it on do not disturb. Apparently a call was coming in.
There was a request to change the angle.
Okay.
All listeners are happy now.
All right, great. There was a request to change the angle. Hopefully everybody is happy with that. Anyhow, what are we talking about? We're talking about Bar Kokhba. We're talking about the year 132 CE. He revolts against Rome. He throws the Roman army out of here. It looks like redemption is upon us, but that evil, nasty Emperor Hadrian brings half the Roman army. He squashes this rebellion. There's blood in the streets from Beitar all the way to the Mediterranean, and he destroys Jerusalem because he realizes Yerushalayim is the battle cry of the Jewish people. Destroy Jerusalem, you destroy the heart of the Jewish nation. And he raises it to the ground and he builds in its stead a Roman city. And every Roman city needs to have a major thoroughfare, a shopping area, a rodeo drive, if you will. And that is known as the Cardo. In fact, you can see some of the original shops just behind me. You can see the arch. That was a shop that was used for over 1,000 years here on the Cardo. And he lines the street with these incredible pillars with Corinthian capitals on the top of it. And who do you think he has build this street? You think he's bringing in Roman masons? No, he's using Jewish slaves. How many Jewish slaves died underneath the boot of Roman oppression building this Cardo that I'm standing above right now? Well, take a look on top of this pillar. You'll notice that there are stones placed on top. Well, for a long time, I used to live here in the old city for 4 years. I've been guiding here for 12 years. And for the longest time, I always saw those stones. And I thought to myself, those stones must be placed in memory of those Jewish slaves that were killed by the Romans, just like you see stones placed on graves. And I said to myself, isn't that amazing? Look at how the Jewish people remember those that came before us, that they actually memorialized those Jewish slaves by placing those stones there. Until one day I saw these little hippie Jews with peyo coming down, like down to their knees, and white kippahs with pom-poms that said "Na Na Nachman" on it. And they were throwing stones to see who could get one to land at the top of that pillar. And I just laughed to myself. And I said, isn't that amazing? Those stones, which I thought represented death, don't represent death, but rather represent what? They represent life. They represent the return of the Jewish people here to Yerushalayim, to our holy city. Watch out, watch out. Car. And they represent life. They represent the return of the Jewish people. And I thought to myself, you know what, even if you had a time machine and you went back in time 2,000 years and you saw that Jewish slave with a Roman boot on top of his neck and he's about to die, and you say, don't worry, in 2,000 years, your great, great, great descendants, your grandchildren will be back here in Yerushalayim celebrating their bar and bat mitzvahs. He would say, I know. What do you mean you know? And he would say, I've read the book of Zechariah, the prophet, who says, even though it'll become unfathomable to you, right? Speaking about Hashem here, God speaking through him, even though it'll be unfathomable to you, it'll be unfathomable to me. I am going to gather up the Jewish people from around the world, from all four corners, and bring them back to Yerushalayim. And one day you will see old man with staff in hand, and you will see children playing in the streets of Yerushalayim. And there I was standing there, looking at those stones, which I thought represented death, but don't just represent life and the return of the Jewish people, but represent the fulfillment of biblical prophecy. And I just think it's so awesome, especially during the 9 days, and especially to think about that on Tisha B'Av, that here we are, one giant leap forward from just 75 years ago, the end of World War II, the Shoah and the Holocaust, that we have our land, we have an army to protect ourselves, and that we have Yerushalayim, where you can see countless children playing in the streets. These aren't tourists, these are children who live here in their old city, who might even say to you, you know what? This is the main square. It looks brand spanking new. Well, it pretty much is. It was rebuilt or re-inaugurated in 2010, but it was built exactly the way the one prior to it was built, which was built on the grounds of one that was built in the 18th century, in the early 1700s, by a rabbi by the name of Yehuda HaHasid, who was a follower of another rabbi who's known as the false messiah by the name of Shabtai Tzvi. And even though these guys were following somebody who led them really astray, their heart was in the right place. They wanted to rebuild Jerusalem. They were ahead of their time. They came here 300 years ago to rebuild the Beit HaMikdash, to rebuild Yerushalayim. And so we remember them by, even though this building is new, by calling it the Horva Synagogue, something that's been ruined. But another thing I just want to point out is the menorah, the beautiful golden menorah that you can see behind me, that was built by the Temple Institute. It is kosher. In other words, it is permissible to be used in the temple when it will be rebuilt, please God, soon. And the reason why I want to highlight this to you is not only that you can see what the menorah looked like in the temple and know that we have one ready to be used, is that I was in the middle of a speaking tour, and I was in just outside of Atlantic City. I was speaking at the JCC there. And as soon as I came in, the head of the place, he looked at me and he says, "What do you think of the menorah in Jerusalem, in the old city, in the Jewish quarter, in the Rova?" And I said, "Well, I think it's wonderful. I think it's great. You know, it's kosher to be used in the temple." He goes, "Well, that's what I want to talk about." Just watch out, there's some pillars behind you. "That's what I want to talk about." I said, "You want to talk about it?" I said, "What do you want to talk about?" He says, "Well, don't you think it's offensive?" I said, "What do you mean offensive?" He goes, "Well, don't you think it offends some people, i.e. the Arabs, that you have a menorah that's permissible to be used in the temple, which you want to rebuild on the Temple Mount, which is where the Dome of the Rock exists right now?" And I said, "You're telling me that because I might offend somebody, we shouldn't have a menorah that's permissible, that is identical to the one we had in the temple, that I can use as a teaching tool to describe to people what the menorah really represented, that it was something in order to represent that light that we're supposed to shed upon the nations, because it might offend somebody?" And then I looked at him and I said, "But don't you want the temple to be rebuilt?" And he says, "I don't want World War III. You don't want, I don't want World War III either. Why do you think I want World War III? He goes, "Well, if you rebuild a temple in Jerusalem on Har HaBayit and where the Dome of the Rock is, you're going to have World War III. And I said, "Well, don't you think that it's possible that, you know, the Arab nations might do tshuva, that they might realize this holiness and this kedusha that Jerusalem has to the Jewish people, that they might go ahead and willingly give over that parcel of land so that we can build our temple there, that they have Mecca, that they have Medina? Isn't that possible?" "Well, it's highly unlikely." I said, "Okay, maybe. I said, "But don't you daven for that? Don't you pray for that? Don't you want that to happen?" I don't want World War III. I want it to come in peaceful ways, but you know what I do want? I do want the temple to be rebuilt. Don't you want the temple to be rebuilt? Couldn't answer me, but I'm asking you right now. Here we are, just a few days away from Tisha B'Av, right? 4 days away from Tisha B'Av. We're here in Jerusalem, in the holy city. We just saw a menorah that's ready to be used. Rebuild it, and we have the menorah. Don't you want the temple to be rebuilt? anyhow, it's just so special here actually walking through the Jewish quarter. In fact, this alleyway, not only as a tour guide do I know so well, watch out, you got a puddle behind you, is that also this was a path that I took for many years as I attended Yeshiva Esha Torah, which is where we're going right now, to the Esha Torah building in order to ascend to the rooftop, which offers just this incredible, majestic view of Har HaBayit, the Temple Mount, the holiest place of the Jewish people, but also the Western Wall, which is the closest place that we can get to the Holy Temple, to the Makom where the temple can be built. And while we're heading down there, we just got a few more stairs to go, and we're going to meet one of the rabbis here at Esha Torah. I want to share a story with you that's represented by this beautiful, magnificent glass sculpture right in the lobby of the main building here of the Heritage Center, which was done by the famous Dale Chihuly. And that glass sculpture epitomizes what Esha Torah is all about. And really, I think epitomizes the mission of the Jewish people, not necessarily as a nation, but as individuals. And what do I mean by that? Is that the chandelier, and we're just going to wait for somebody to open up the building. Oh, we can't see the chandelier so much, but here, we'll stand over here. In fact, come with me over here. There's like a small section that you can look out onto the Western Wall. And I'll share this story with this magnificent, magnificent view, which I can promise you is only going to get better when we go to the top of the building. And now I can shed this mask once again for a few moments. So anyways, the glass sculpture built by Dale Chihuly, designed by him, who spoke with the Rosh Yeshiva Tzetzal, Rav Noach Weinberg here of Esha Torah, in order to learn what the story was all about. And Rav Noach shared a story that is in the Gemara by one of the most famous rabbis, I think, of all time. If there was a Mount Rushmore of rabbis, Rebbe Akiva would be on it. And Rebbe Akiva, believe it or not, could not read or write at the age of 40. And he was a landscaper working in the yard of a very wealthy landowner. And while there, he caught eyesight of his beautiful daughter, Rachel, and they fell in love instantly. And Rachel must have said to Rebbe Akiva, "Oh, I can't wait to have children with you and for you to teach the words of the Torah of God's beautiful wisdom to our children." There's a little noise over here, so I'm gonna come this way. And he says, there's only one problem is I don't know how to read or write. And I don't know God's wisdom. And she says, even though I can see we're b'sheret, we're meant for one another, if you can't teach our children, I have to think about them. I don't know if we can get married. He says, no, don't worry. I'm going to go learn all of it. Don't worry. I'll be right back. He runs off. And he tries to learn a little bit of Torah, and he's breaking his head open, his alphabet. He's got to learn the alphabet. He's got to learn the language. And finally, he does something that all of us have done at least once in our life. Probably our children have done as well. And we hope that they won't, but it's inevitable. He takes his books and he throws them off the table. And he says two words that we should never say. He says, I can't. I quit. Right? I'm too stupid. I'm too ugly. I'm too fat. I'm too this. I'm too that. I'll never succeed. I'll never make it in this world. He runs off into the woods, and there's this waterfall, and the water's crashing all over the place. Then he notices this water. There's one drop of water that hits the rock and goes through it. There's a hole in the rock, and he has this epiphany. He realizes that hole was burrowed out by water, drop after drop after drop. And he said to himself, if water which is soft can burrow a hole in the rock which is hard, then I too can break through my own klipo, through my own shell, and tap into my own greatness. And I'll be able to not only learn the Aleph Bet, but I'll also be able to learn all of God's wisdom. And he became one of the greatest rabbis of all time. Most people know who Rebbe Akiva is, but the lesson there and the lesson of Eshet Torah is that it's never too late. Project Inspire, it's never too late. It's not too late right now to reverse the curse, right? I'm from Boston, to reverse the curse and to end this baseless hatred that we saw 2,000 years ago and have unconditional love for our fellow Jews, for humanity, to put aside our political differences, to put aside those things that we disagree and just look at one another and realize that that individual has a neshama, that that person has a soul, that that person has an essence inside of them that never was, never will be again, that needs to be shined, that needs to be spread out so that the world can experience it and that I can experience, that we can resonate together. But that'll never happen if we have hatred in our hearts. And that's why the temple was taken away from us, because we could not accept one another, even if we don't approve one another, that we could not accept one another. All right, the door's still locked over here. I know that somebody's supposed to be coming here soon. Just what time is it right now? One more time? 5:41. Okay, fantastic. So you know what? Come on over here. Come on over here. I want to show you something really cool. With your wrist turns. This is awesome. We got just a couple more minutes until the building is going to be open. This is a very special. They're opening the building for us because unfortunately it's closed right now due to COVID-19, and all the classes are online, and the students aren't in that main building. So we're just going to walk through this little tunnel over here and just come right around the corner here. And we will have another magnificent, magnificent view of the Western Wall. And you can see this new building that's still under construction. You can hear some of the construction right now. And this is going to be the new visitor center here of the Western Wall. There'll be a beautiful museum that people can learn about the history of the Jewish people. Now, when we get up to the rooftop, you'll get a better view of it. But right now, you see the Western Wall. You can see how it's all divided too right now because of COVID-19, with different areas for different prayer circles, for what we call minyan. So everybody is safe while praying here at the Western Wall. But the Western Wall really runs about 470 meters, or roughly about 1,500 feet. We only see about 1/10 of it. And the height of the wall itself also, we would have seen, it would have been triple that, right? It stood 153 feet, which is 15 stories. It stood 15 stories high, and it was 1,500 feet long and 1,000 feet wide. In fact, it was the largest edifice, the largest building, sorry for the noise, the largest building in the Roman Empire at that time, when it was built and when it was destroyed. It would only be eclipsed in size 9 years later when the Romans built the Colosseum. When the Romans built the Colosseum, right? What was the Colosseum? The Colosseum was a house of death. What was the temple? The temple was known as Beit Shalom, a house of peace. It was known as a house of prayer for whom? For all nations. The Jewish people's battle cry was Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, that we're all one, not just the Jewish people, but everything, all of humanity, the Jews and the non-Jews together, and not just humanity, but all the beasts in the fields, and not just the beasts in the fields, but the trees and the flowers and the inanimate objects, that everything needs to be treated with honor and with respect, to realize that it's all part of our Creator, that we are really all one. Watch out, there's a wall. That we're really all one. And they destroyed that concept, right? They destroyed a house of prayer for all nations. We're inclusive, right? Jews are inclusive, right? We want everybody to celebrate with us. We even say, hey, come on Sukkot and celebrate with us. We'll even pay for the sacrifices. Just come celebrate us and realize that we're really all part of this together, that we all have a mission in this world. And they destroyed that and they built the Colosseum, which is a house of death. It's a house of death. It's terrible. They pitted man versus man. And yet people go to Rome before they come here to Jerusalem. Before they come here to Jerusalem. So there's
The Mayberg entrance is open to us now.
the which one?
The Mayberg entrance has been opened for us remote.
Oh, okay.
Is this Mayberg?
Don't know. Okay, we're gonna come around this way. We are going to take you up to, no, just wait right there, Phil. I'm just gonna see if this is the entrance here. No. Not to worry, folks. Stay with us because we are going to the top of Asia Torah. We're going to meet one of the rabbis here in Asia Torah who is also going to share some of his wisdom with us that will give us a greater understanding of exactly what it is that we lost here. Oh yeah, this is right here. This is what I thought. Oh, wonderful. And here he is. Baruch Hashem. Take the camera again. Thank you so much. Rabbi Rossman, thank you so much for joining us today and for giving us access to the rooftop. Before we go there, I just want to show everybody just real quick, because I just spoke about the glass chandelier. I want them to see it, and then we're going to head right on out with you, okay? Come on over here. We're in the beautiful building right now, and you can see, if you look up to the top here, you can see the beautiful glass chandelier I spoke about. And Aisha Torah in Hebrew, it's the fire of the Torah. You can see the fire at the very top. You can see the flames, the yellow, the orange, the red, but coming down to a single drop of water all the way at the bottom, represented by the blue glass, which of course was the waterfall that I spoke about, that Rabbi Akiva went to when he had his epiphany that said, hey, just like that, as long as I'm consistent, right? As long as I practice every day, right? All my friends out there in Philadelphia, practice. I'm talking about practice, right? Every day, be dedicated to grow that love inside of yourself for your fellow Jew, for your fellow mankind, so that we can hopefully see the rebuilding of the Beit HaMikdash. And that's really the story, I think, of Aisha Torah, Project Inspire, and other organizations like that are connecting us to our heritage and our deep philosophical values and ideals that we spoke about all the way in the beginning, right? What are we mourning? Mourning a loved one, we're mourning an object, a building, or an ideal that's been lost. Look how chaotic the world is today, right? And then we spoke a little bit about potential, right? The potential of what could have been, the potential of what it might have been like had the temple existed this year. Would there be less wars? Would there be less terrorism? Would there not be this pandemic? I don't know. But I do think it's very possible. I do think it's very possible. So here we are, folks. Look around here. This is just absolutely unbelievable. The top of the Aisha Torah World Heritage Center, overlooking the Western Wall. You get a beautiful view of the Dome of the Rock. Again, the Dome of the Rock, when I see that, I think to myself, thank God it's there. It's been protecting the place that the temple was built, and the only place the temple can be built. Here in Jerusalem, if it wasn't there, maybe there'd be condominiums up there, or a roller rink, a mall, who knows? But that's the oldest Islamic building in the world, constructed in 691, and it's been preserving that holy place for the time that we merit for the rebuilding of the Beit HaMikdash. And so let's get a better understanding now of what the Beit HaMikdash really represented. And I'm going to invite one of the rabbis here of Aisha Torah, Rabbi David Rossman, to hopefully shed a little bit of light onto us about what this holy city and what the holy building, the temple, really stood for, and hopefully what we can gain from its rebuilding, and maybe something that we can think about during this auspicious time of Tisha B'Av. I'm going to put on my mask. I'm going to come a little close because the microphone's in my ears right now. So can you see also the Temple Mount? Just want to make sure everybody can see that one just down this side. Thank you. So shed a little light onto us, a little bit about what the temple represented and what it stood for.
Definitely a lot. It's I'll tell you actually something personal. Moment, I don't think you know this. I've actually been sick. Sick the last
COVID-19. Really? Take a step back. Oh wow, Baruch Hashem, I did not know that.
This is my first day back, actually.
Wow.
Almost a month.
Wow.
So normally when I come up here with tours, guests that come up and they always ask me, they say, Matt, you work here every day? Like, and I have to be honest, I don't feel it. Because when you're here every single day and you see it, the noise of the bongos, does that something bother you? Like, you don't even think about it. And I tell you the truth, it's the first time here in a month, and it's amazing. I miss it. I can't. It's hard to. I'm not such an emotional guy, but this is. It's not so simple. And I think one of the special uniqueness of the temple was the custom was to come 3 times a year to come to this spot. And sometimes when we're complacent in our everyday lives, like sometimes I'm complacent being here, we don't even realize what we're missing. We don't realize how great it is to see miracles, to see all types of Jews, all different walks of life coming here and spending time together for the same purpose. Can you imagine all the Jewish people, all walks of life, coming from up north and down south, from everywhere, for the same reason? That's an amazing thing. And it recharges you and it gives you a sense of purpose and it gives you clarity of like where we're going and what we're doing. And 3 times a year, that's what happens. They come here to the temple and they refocus. They see the beauty of Jerusalem, the beauty of the temple, the beauty of God. Like you felt it. It's in the air. And sometimes in our lives, we lose that. Even when things are good and going smoothly. And we forget what it's like to have a relationship with a wife, what it's like to have a relationship with our kids, what it's like to have a job. We forget because the normal way of life, and we need to change sometimes. Hopefully it's a change that coming to the temple. Say, wow, it could be even so much better. I thought life was so good, and wow, it could be so much more. And I think that was one very unique part of having the temple that we lose. Still, when you come to the hotel, see all the different types of people, you feel unified. But how much more were we unified?
Do you mind putting these in?
When we're the unity that we feel when we come to the hotel now and see all the different types of people, how much more so it was in the times of the temple. So can you only imagine that? Coming and praying to the same person, saying, God, you're here for the same thing. You don't care about what this person is wearing, that person is wearing, where he's from, where she's from. That's irrelevant. You're here for a common purpose, and you see what you could grow to and raise to and enjoy and everything like that. And it allows you to reflect, to push yourself back when you leave. The law was you had to sleep here. You weren't allowed to just come and leave. You had to sleep over for a night. You have to sit in like, wow, I can live this way all year, no matter where I am.
You know, it's a little bit windy, and I think the wind's coming here. Do you mind if we just move over there? And I think it could block the wind a little bit. Here, follow us around here. Just gonna come up and around. It's actually a really beautiful model of the second temple. It's really the second temple 2.2. It was built by King Herod, this one, but there was the original second temple when we returned from Babylon, 7-year exile. And then the Hashmoneans also, after the story of Hanukkah, re-sanctified it and expanded it. But what we see here is actually King Herod's, but come down with me. Kind of hoping, and I think if you come right here, that it has blocked the wind a little bit. So Rabbi, it kind of reminds me a little bit of when I come here with groups on Shabbat and you see Jews of all walks of life, right? Here I am, I have a knitted kippah on and you have a black velvet kippah on. And you see Jews who have animals, yeah, just decline it. And you see Jews from all walks of life, and they're all coming here celebrating in a unified way Shabbat, right? That has kept the Jewish people together for all of these years. And to be able to tap into that and to realize that, when we stand together, we really are unstoppable as the Jewish people, when we can put aside some of our differences and just see each other for what we really are, which is that small aspect of Hashem's glory, of His, and shed that light onto one another. This world could be a really, really a better place. And I'll just close with this and stay on, because I'm just going to also do a couple panoramic shots of this area of Jerusalem so that you could take, to heart everything that we spoke about today and from the wonderful words that Rabbi Rossman shared with us. I want to share some words, an idea that I heard from another great rabbi of the 20th century, Rabbi Victor Miller, who was speaking to some of his students in New York. And he said, living here in Flatbush, living in Borough Park, we walk around and we see Jews all day long. And we see Jews wearing black hats, and we see Jews wearing kippahs, and we see Jews wearing their tzitzits, and we see Jews keeping their mitzvot. That sometimes we take those Jews for granted. And just like the rabbi said, that coming here every single day, you almost take this for granted. And then you weren't able to come here for a month, and you realize how much you didn't have during that month, and you rekindle that love. And Rabbi Victor Miller said, it's time to put a stop to that. And not just the ones with the black hats, and not just the ones with the kippah, but every single Jew, that we should love them unconditionally, because they have something inside of them that needs to be expressed. And if we're constantly putting them down and constantly focused on our disagreements, we'll never nurture, we'll never water that particular part in that it can bloom into what it needs to be. So again, thank you so much for joining us today. Rabbi, thank you for allowing us up here. If you don't mind, I'm gonna just take a couple more minutes. I'm gonna show you guys the view. And I just wanna wish all of you a meaningful, powerful, and really a successful fast, right? A successful fast that we should be able to tap into our, beautiful neshamas, our souls, our greatness, so that from this moment, not Tisha B'Av, but this is the 5th of Av, moving forward, we should be able to love one another. And instead of the temple, which was destroyed for baseless hatred, it'll be rebuilt for our unconditional love for one another. Thank you from the holy city of Jerusalem. Enjoy some of these panoramic shots, and I bid you all farewell. Thank you. So again, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us here. Thank you to Project Inspire for all the wonderful, incredible content that you deliver every single day to all of our homes, especially during this time. Thank you to all the rabbis and to the individuals who make it possible. I'm David Sussman, your personal tour guide here in Israel. I hope to see you again here soon.